Welcome to the Real News Network. As the economic crisis deepens and millions of workers are thrown out of their jobs, people around the world are asking, why did this crisis begin, and is there a solution? Are we into 2 or 3 years of recession or 10 years of hell? To help us answer this question, we're joined by William Engdahl. He's a political economist and author of A Century of War, Anglo-American Politics and the New World Order. William joins us from Frankfurt, Germany. Thanks for joining us, William.
Thank you for having me, Paul.
So paint us a picture of how the economic crisis is affecting Europe.
It's a very differentiated picture going on in Europe right now. You mentioned the case of Ukraine, which is a basket case, really. Italy has the worst economic recession in 30 years. In Germany, it's dramatic, the worst slowdown in industrial production in recent memory. And in other countries of the EU, Great Britain, for example, it's simply the economy is falling off a cliff. However, that being said, it's really differentiated. It's a little bit different from what's going on in North America, especially the United States, in that here in Europe, we don't have the same madness with the subprime securitization of toxic assets that you have in the States. It's more an indirect knock-on effect, if you will, of the United States financial meltdown. And what's happened is a lot of European banks bought these securities from Wall Street, this toxic waste. And when Lehman Brothers went bankrupt, was allowed to go bankrupt, it was not rescued by Paulson and the U.S. Treasury back last September, that put all interbank transactions throughout the world into a question mark, and no bank trusted any other bank.
Many people were predicting in the early days of this crisis, a sort of collapse of the US dollar, a run on the T-bill, American Treasury bill. In fact, we saw quite the opposite. Many other currencies are tanking while people are running to the American dollar and the US Treasury bill. Is that likely to continue, or will the world lose confidence in the American Treasury bill?
Well, we have to look at why that effect was taking place. What you had in the run-up to December 31, you had huge repatriation of capital into hedge funds based in the States because they had to meet redemption calls from their investors. You had banks who had desperate time to roll over dollar loans that they had made. European banks had borrowed during the good times in 06, 07. They had borrowed literally tens, hundreds of billions of dollars in short-term loans at cheaper rates through the dollar. And suddenly they had to roll those loans over, and the U.S. banks weren't providing the dollars. So they were desperately grabbing for dollars anywhere they could. So that was really a technical, if you will, short-term effect, and flight for safety by hedge funds and U.S. banks that institutions like AIG, Bear Stearns, and so forth that had to really pull in their resources back home. So that gave this paradoxical boost to the dollar at the time the fundamentals of the U.S. economy are worse than they've been since the Great Depression.
But is there still an issue that the global financial system just depends on this T-bill, American Treasury bill, as its baseline, and people can't give up on it even if they don't really believe in it?
It's not really a question of faith or love of the T-bill. It's simply a practical question that since 1944, the world has been on a Bretton Woods dollar reserve system, and still 60% of world trade and world central bank reserves are denominated in dollars. The euro makes up about 30% now. It's a significant increase since the euro was launched in 1999, but it's by no means replacing the dollar. So that creates a technical problem of a shortage of dollars to roll over these credits, and that's creating huge banking stresses here in Europe.
So with the crash of the ruble, the crash of the pound, the unraveling crisis, what happens to the global finance system if people give up on the American Treasury bill?
Well, this is what I've been saying. I'm finishing a book on this subject called Power of Money, The Rise and Decline of the American Century, dealing with this whole money-centered power projection that the U.S. has been engaged in since World War II. The question is now whether Europe begins to orient toward a kind of European space in conjunction with certain Middle East countries, in conjunction with certain African countries, with Russia, with China, and gradually reduce its dependency on the direct dollar zone transactions, trade and currency transactions. They've definitely begun decoupling from the Wall Street financial transactions that were the rule up until 2000, early 2008. But same thing with China. China is beginning to look toward convertibility of its currency, the yuan, but not in general terms, only in terms of its Asian trading partners. So I think we're going to see the Middle East, Dubai, and other countries in the Arabian Gulf are also beginning to talk about regional currency blocks. So I think in fits and jerks, we're going to see a tendency toward this around the world.
And what would be the impact on the American economy if this takes place?
Well, I think regardless of whether this takes place or not, the American economy, and it pains me to say this, but it's going to face the pure hell over the next 10 years. This is going to be a depression that will really outdo the Great Depression of the 1930s from 29 to 38. It's going to be far worse and compounded by the demographics in the United States, which next year and the following years is going to create a horrendous drain on the financial system as the baby boom retirees are going to begin to cash in their 401k pension funds and draw on Social Security rather than pay into the government's trust fund.
Are you thinking that the crisis will be felt more intensely in the United States than in Europe and other parts of the world, or are we looking at the whole world is going into this 10 years of hell?
No, well, it depends on what the rest of the world does. Frankly, I see little room for maneuver, whether it's Obama as president or Superman or Donald Duck. Really, there's little he can do with the record indebtedness, the record deficits. There's been estimated $1.2 trillion for fiscal '09. These are just staggering numbers in the U.S. And the economy has been rotted out, hollowed out, outsourced to largely to Asia and South America and Eastern Europe over the last 10, 15 years. So what you're dealing with is really a shadow of a real economy anymore in the United States. That's going to take a decade or more to rebuild. In Europe, it's not that problem at all. The infrastructure in Europe is in, I would say comparatively, in quite good shape compared with the United States. The rail links across Europe, high-speed rail links, the Autobahn system, the rapid road interstate intercountry system in Europe is very well developed, and of course the airport transportation. So you have the economic infrastructure in place. The development over the last 15 to 20 years toward Eastern Europe has created a whole new market for West European industry, and that's growing at a quite significant pace. And I think the compatibility between East and West, with Russia supplying crucial raw materials, natural gas, oil to Western Europe, China as well, that creates a kind of a Eurasian economic space that really is a quite natural alternative to the dollar orientation.
In the next segment of our interview, let's talk about two issues. One is what happens to England, the United Kingdom, and are we seeing a demise of the Anglo-American empire, as it will, and also the demand across Europe and certainly in other places is the whole issue of nationalizing the banks as one of the solutions. So please join us for the next segment of our interview with William Engdahl.
Donate today and receive a new documentary film available to members of the Real News Network. The History of the National Security State with legendary author Gore Vidal. Bonus features of the DVD include an in-depth response to Vidal from ex-CIA analyst Ray McGovern, who served under 7 U.S. presidents, an exclusive interview with Colin Powell's former Chief of Staff Larry Wilkerson, and an insightful interview with oil policy analyst Antonia Juhas.
The news magazine of the screen. Living Glimpses of history in the making.
Hollywood and Washington, there's a symbiotic relationship. They both deal with illusions. Reality doesn't often play much of a part. I think I saw through the myth of the Cold War almost from the beginning. I was a Washington political kid from a political family. Roosevelt first had radio because he had this great speaking voice and everyone liked to hear. Truman proceeded to break every arrangement that Roosevelt had set up for a peaceful coexistence. And Truman thought that it would be a good idea. Why not just stay armed all the time? And then he devised the national security state. You've got to go up and swear allegiance to the United States or else you're a commie. I mean, we had imported fascism. We get Dwight Eisenhower, who said that we have this great military industrial complex. It is a dangerous thing. And he said this is going to change everything. And the way our country's governed is going to change us politically. Along comes Jack Kennedy, who wanted to make his mark, believed in the Cold War. But he said, in this kind of politics, it is the appearance of things that matters. I think everybody should take a sober look at the world about us. The national security state still exists, only it isn't communism anymore, it's terrorism. This is the most serious thing that has happened in the history of the United States. Knowledge is power. We need an honest news system.
We need the real news.
This is the sort of thing we can build right now without anyone else's permission from the government or from the business community. It's the power's in our hands.
If we're not going to sleepwalk into more wars, we think we need to start with a television news network that won't bow to pressure and has the courage to seek facts. And that means independent economics. And that's why we need you.
Make a tax-deductible donation now of at least $10 a month or a one-time give of at least $75. As a thank you for your support, we will send you the new documentary film, The History of the National Security State.